The panel, Pete's seat. When you see what's happened here with the two judges, what is your expected reaction from Republicans? Because so far, when judges say anything that Donald Trump doesn't like, they attack the judge.
Well, I can tell you what my reaction is. It's not a hot take, but a lukewarm take. I am in the wait-and-see mode on all of these various issues working their way through the courts. In the end, the first 2 years of this second Trump term are going to be defined by the clash between the executive and judicial branch. We'll see what happens in the midterms. That dynamic may shift to executive versus legislative. But for right now, the clash is in the courts because this administration is testing all the boundaries that exist, all the traditional norms, all the legal norms. They're testing them one after another. And a district court decision will then go to the appeals court, will go to the Supreme Court. So wait and see.
I will definitely think that they're testing everything, which are the guardrails of democracy, in my humble redneck opinion. I'll also tell you that they know what they're doing by sending this to every appeals court they can, because Donald Trump has picked a whole lot of Supreme Court justices, and that's what he's banking on. And for all of you Democrats at home, this is what happens when you win or lose elections. It matters if you win or lose, because you get to pick the judges of who's in the Supreme Court. And this is what Donald Trump is banking on.
How do you see this?
I think it is an egregious demonstration of what happens when an administration attacks the individuals, attacks due process, attacks civil rights. And, you know, good for the courts. They are standing up for that due process, for those individual rights, for, frankly, the Constitution. Those two cases that you mentioned, Sarah, the judge that talked about the law firms that were being attacked, he was brutal. He was brutal against the team that was defending what Trump was trying to do, essentially saying, have you been in a courtroom before? Have you even practiced law? So to me, that just underscores, and Pete's right, I mean, they're going at this on purpose, but to me, it is also an indication that Americans need to be ready. They need to be vigilant of what's happening here, because it's never been done before. And we are on the brink of a constitutional crisis. And the other case that you talked about, the deportation case, is also something that is incredibly egregious. And the courts are actually doing what they need to do to stop the massive overreach. These were thugs, essentially, taking people, innocent people. They haven't proven that they've done what they are accusing them of doing, off the streets. Not just this woman who was a student. They've taken grandparents. They've taken fathers, separating them from their kids, essentially saying these are terrorists, but never proving it.
Let me just quickly, because you mentioned what the judge said, and we're talking about the first case, which was the case against law firms. Judge Richard Leon is a Bush appointee, in case anyone starts attacking him for being a Democrat and being put in by a Democrat. But he said, not related to, not related to
Just want to be clear.
Wants to be clear. All right. So he said, in no uncertain terms, and this is a quote, in the Wilmer Hale case, there is no doubt this retaliatory action chills speech and legal advocacy, and that is qualified as a constitutional harm. And he blocked part of President Trump's executive order against Wilmer Hale. Is this having a chilling effect on anyone who thinks about fighting against what Donald Trump is doing?
Well, Pete used the word testing. That's not the word I would use. I would use something a little bit more egregious. But the fact that you have legal beagles and the fact that you have judges that you just mentioned are not appointed. Judges are supposed to be impartial, by the way. It doesn't matter who appoints them. They're supposed to follow the law. So just to push back a little bit on Chuck was saying there, but I think you agree with that as well. The fact that these folks are outwardly saying this stuff in court. This happened during the Rudy Giuliani stuff. Remember, there's a non-zero person in the room. What does that mean? I don't know what that means, when they were doing some type of legal challenges. So testing is not the word I would use. They're doing something. We don't know what it is. We are going to see it play out in the court. But I did want to get back to something that you said about the cases, especially the Tufts University one, because the reason why that one is sticking with me, and Marco Rubio did that presser recently, Sarah, if you guys all saw this. But if you guys recall in July of 2021, when Cuba was having big protests from Diaz Canal, Marco Rubio literally went out that day and released a statement saying that we support the Cuban people and their voice and what they're doing in these streets. And as a Cuban kid and somebody who lives in Miami right now, who I don't know the Secretary of State like that, but I will say I'm incredibly disappointed with him in doing this to this type of person that is again, supporting a position, we have a freedom of speech in this country. She's supporting a position. She writes an opinion column, I believe it is, for the paper. Like, rounding somebody up like that is clearly of legal status, and I've talked to immigration attorneys right now. The testing part of this, Pete, like, they don't know what is the law, and they're just telling their clients, make sure you have everything in order. That's the scary part about all of this.
Well, as you're mentioning, if I could, as you're mentioning censorship, myself as a conservative and running in 2024, running in 2020, I know somebody like myself and many other people that have been censored for years, okay? So we know all about censorship, and we all know that First Amendment speech doesn't really apply to absolutely everyone. And as a Republican, I can say that for a fact. But I will go back here in a second, and I will say the judges that are involved here, you've got one judge, Millett, who is actually a Democrat donor, has dedicated and donated her time to Democrats, upward of $30,000, and that's just recently. She also did some legal work for Obama. And so I do believe that there's an agenda here. As mentioned, this is going to play out in court. But if anybody knows what goes on in a courtroom, it's President Donald Trump.
This particular judge is a Bush appointee.
Or which judge? I'm talking about the judge with deportations, Patricia Millett.
I'm talking about the judge about the
case.
Tufts,
Yeah.
the Tufts case.
Okay.
That's a
And
George
the,
Bush
and the
appointee.
executive order case
And
that
to
just came down.
Mike's point, that's not what we should be. I mean, all judges obviously are going to have a point of view, but they leave that at the door. They're supposed to, right? They're supposed to.
But I think we saw during the 2024 election cycle, they did not leave that at the door because President Trump spent half his time in the courtroom while everybody else was rallying around.
But he was
Because
accused
maybe
of.
he broke the law.
Really?
There was a question about.
And it worked politically.
He's
for
a
her.
34 times convicted felon.
A lot of people will say that that was politically motivated as well.
But a jury
and guess
made
what?
the
He won the
decision.
popular vote. He
The
won all
jury made
7
the
swing
decision.
states,
Yeah.
and a lot of those cases have been dropped.
Democrats.
Well, then
making
why
the
so
decision.
many cases
It
have
was a
been dropped
jury
by
of
now?
your peers that were making this
But let's go
decision.
back to
a lot of these
the
cases
If you're
have been
attacking the institutional process of justice in this country, that's a whole other
That's what I'm
issue.
saying. We got to go back to the overarching premise here. The overarching premise is there's 3 branches of government. The judiciary is the impartial one where we take our grievances to. So when the legislative doesn't make a law and the executive does an executive order that's challenged in the courts, we have to start respecting courts' decisions. If we're going to cherry pick every single judge that has a leaning on a conservative viewpoint or a leaning on the liberal viewpoint, we're going to be here all day and we're going to continue to play this whataboutism game.
Democrats should
That's
make
the
sure
problem.
they keep that in mind when it goes to the Supreme Court, because when the Supreme Court rules against what I think is the wrong decision because they were appointed by Republicans, they should leave it at home.
But we're gonna respect
the
that
opposite
decision,
side
right?
of this is the Supreme Court is the same in the other direction.
Just quickly, Kim, to you, Kimberly.
Sure.
You talked about censorship. And I guess the question is, I know that conservatives have been complaining about censorship, that has been something that has come up again and again.
Yes.
So I guess the question is, do 2 wrongs make a right? Because if this is censorship, if that is what we are seeing, we do not know all the details of the case, but so far what we know doesn't look great. It looks like an attack on First Amendment rights.
Well, I don't think 2 wrongs make a right, but I don't think anybody at this table was really speaking up and sounding off when people like myself were censored. You're doing it now.
But I guess the question is, talking about it, which we have, and being the president of the United States and saying, I'm going to send DHS out and snatch you off the street because of something that you wrote. Potentially, there may be more, we don't know, but right
I
now
think
that's all we
have to let that
know.
play out instead of, us making these assumptions.
I think
Go ahead.
I think that one of the things that, Pete, I think you brought up is, do we stay on the legislative and executive branch, and then we look towards the legislative branch electorally in the midterms? I think that all of these things, and I think that there are folks that come down on the Trump side, and if you've got a Donald Trump poster above your bed at the house, I'm not talking to you. Or if you got a Chuck Rocha poster up, I'm probably not talking to you either, but my wife's going to be mad at you. I'm talking about regular folks out there, regular people that are just watching all of this who really aren't tuned in. They don't know who the judge is. They don't know who appointed that judge. But they know what they're reading in the paper, whether it's the Signal chat or whether it's this thing with this judge, or they see that video of that woman getting picked up. They don't know exactly what's going on, but they know that in America is not right. And I think you're going to see a lot more political implications on that as we head towards the midterms.
But they also know that there are activist judges in this country. They've seen that play out for decades now, particularly on the left, where judges are not just looking at the constitutionality. I'm not talking about these cases
I just think if you
specifically,
care
but
about
if you're a
judges,
casual observer,
you've already picked a side, I
you
think.
know
Yeah,
that there are
that's-
activist judges
That's
out
your
there.
opinion.
But
That's your
yeah, that's what I'm
opinion
saying.
because
They're
you
not
don't
supposed
like
to.
the
No, it's
opinion.
my-
You
it's the
don't
truth.
like.
It's
you
my
don't,
truth.
No, you don't like the decision that those judges made. And when Republicans don't like the decision that judges make, they call them activist judges, and they frankly call for their impeachment. That's not something that we should be doing when we are literally on the brink of a constitutional
Well,
crisis.
Pete, your truth and the truth are two different things. Like that's
That's
number
right.
one. Number two, I want to get back to what she was talking about with the free speech stuff. I worked in product and technology for 15 years. I helped launch the app that people are watching this on tonight. If you're watching on Max, don't watch the college basketball games. But there is terms of use and terms of service. When you act into those and you hit that accept all with that blue dot and you don't read any of it, you can be kicked off of that platform because there's content moderation policies. That's not free speech. That's not your house. That's Elon's house. You can say whatever you want outside. You can start your own thing. You can get Amazon Web Services. You can do all these hosting platforms. I agree with you that they don't bubble up conservative content, but that's different because, again, we don't own those platforms. So we have to adhere to the terms of use and terms of services. That is anybody that is watching this that has ever done legal, you know what it is, terms of use on any platform will tell you that that's the way it is. This is a content moderation thing. We don't amplify certain things. Just look at the Biden story. You could, the Hunter Biden stuff. You can still read it on NewYorkPost.com. Twitter just wasn't amplifying it because they couldn't
that's not a
confirm
problem
it.
now.
No, I understand that, but that's what I'm saying. We can't get
Right.
mad at it.
Right.
You can't get mad at it, Chuck. We all can't get mad at it
we
because it's
can get
Elon's
mad,
house.
but we
We can get
understand
mad, but
the
we understand.
reality.
Correct.
Absolutely.
It's a platform,
Yes.
right? So, but I agree with you that there is content that is suppressed and not bubbled up.
But that is not the
100% agree. But that's
judiciary. That
correct.
is not the judiciary.
All right, we're